G'day, mate. 40 here. So these new Trump nominees for his cabinet give us some insight, I think, into this next Trump term. Most importantly, Donald Trump is not optimizing for competence. So expect this next Trump term to be filled with chaos, corruption, and incompetence. And in all likelihood, a significant number of government services will become less efficient, less effective, and of lower quality. Trump is not optimizing for people of good character. He's not optimizing for people with the requisite experience. The nomination of Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary is absolutely reckless. The man has no experience running a large organization. Incredibly reckless by Donald Trump to nominate Hegseth for SecDef. You want someone with experience running a large bureaucracy, and Pete Hegseth has none. Zip, zero, zilch. And you also see Trump optimizing for entertainment value and for attention, rather than for good governance. So these Trump picks indicate that Donald Trump is not optimizing for the good, rational governance of this country. So these are not the sort of picks that are going to appeal to the voters on the margins who ended up choosing Donald Trump. Now, thanks to my situationist perspective, right, I recognize that even though Pete Hegseth has no experience running a bureaucracy, neither does Matt Gaetz, but they may have skills that rise to the occasion in this particular circumstance. They could surprise us. They could be highly effective. Right? They may change the way things are done. But if I were a betting man, I would go with reckless, incompetent, chaotic, dysfunctional, inefficient, ineffective, and corrupt. So I think these picks justify that half of the criticism of Donald Trump that I think is accurate. That he's more interested in the show than in governing. That he's more interested in loyalty than in competence and effectiveness. He's more interested in attention rather than getting things done, the hard work, the nuts and bolts of governing. On the other hand, have to be humble and recognize that Matt Gaetz, that there is a chance that he'll get through, or he'll be a recess appointment as Attorney General. I suspect overall that these picks will cause low morale, and that a lot of good workers will decide to quit, or they will work with less effectiveness and enthusiasm. So you ideally don't want to have low morale in the workplace. And when workers don't respect their boss, right, that tends to result in low morale. I don't know why people in the Justice Department would respect Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General. I don't know why 2 million employees of the Defense Department would respect Pete Hegseth. How do these guys compare to the picks of the Democrats? Well, I'm unaware of anything impressive about Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. So I'd place these picks in high risk, high reward. Matt Gaetz is intelligent and Pete Hegseth is intelligent. I agree with most of their political perspectives. So high risk, high reward. Lloyd Austin was a nothing as Secretary of Defense. He was someone who knew how to play the bureaucratic game, but he didn't innovate at the Defense Department. Right? He didn't accomplish anything important. He was absent, often without telling people what was going on, because he was getting surgery. Merrick Garland as Attorney General, mixed results. So compared to Joe Biden's picks, the Trump picks are much riskier, and they have a much bigger upside and a much bigger downside. So Trump is doing a combination of conventional Republican picks that should appeal to traditional Republicans, and then half of the picks are MAGA. I don't know enough about Tulsi Gabbard, so I don't find it disqualifying that she visited Syria in 2018. But this is a great time for Democrats and the media to do their job, to scrutinize and to challenge these Trump picks. And this is the time for the dumping of opposition research. So let's find out everything bad about these Trump cabinet picks. It's interesting that many people still think that Donald Trump plays 4D chess, but in reality, he's incredibly impulsive. I think it was Steve Murphy who ran John McCain's 2008 campaign. He said that Donald Trump is simultaneously the biggest liar to ever be US president and the most honest. Right? There are no hidden parts of Donald Trump's brain and personality. So on the one hand, he is the most open and honest. Right? There are relatively few surprises coming from his personality. Now, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I could not have predicted in 1,000 years that Pete Hegseth would be nominated for SecDef and Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. But Trump is an open book. Right, I love that line. He's simultaneously the most duplicitous and the most honest president we've ever had. I love most of Pete Hegseth's positions. Right? I love his positions that women do not belong in combat. 100% agree. I agree that the United States Armed Forces should not be pushing diversity as a goal. Should not be playing the diversity, equity, inclusion, affirmative action game. I disagree with the stand he took on Eddie Gallagher. So I read the book on Eddie Gallagher. That was the rogue sniper who was just gratuitously shooting at Iraqis and putting his unit in danger. And then his fellow officers, fellow soldiers risked their careers to stand up and to report him. And then Pete Hegseth appealed directly to Donald Trump to stop disciplinary proceedings against Eddie Gallagher. And eventually, I think the Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, resigned over Trump's interference. So the Trump base is overall skeptical of institutions to hostile to institutions. So I agree with the skeptical bit. I don't agree with the knee-jerk hostility bit, because you can't get anything done outside of institutions. There are not enough Trumpians who can be trusted to put Trump's agenda to fill these posts. Competent bureaucratic potential leaders are anti-Trump. Should Trump put never-Trumpers into those spots? Hegseth is an ultra-Zionist, over-the-top evangelical philo-Semitism. He's been accused of Christian nationalism. But my main concern about him is he has no experience running a bureaucracy. There are 2 million Defense Department employees. Right? The idea that you would put someone in a SecDef who has no experience running a bureaucracy is reckless. And so I'm concerned that this next Trump term will be reckless, that he doesn't have enough people on his team who will put a stop to his reckless inclinations. So during the first term, right, he had enough responsible adults in the room willing to stand up to him. Sometimes this was for the good, sometimes this was for the bad. But yeah, I'm concerned that overall we're going to have less effective government putting out lower quality services. We're going to have recklessness, corruption, and incompetence, massive numbers of scandals, and Donald Trump does not have a great record running things. So I see a lot of red flags, and a lot of spending of political capital and goodwill. And so if these nominees start dropping out as there's more and more damaging information released about them, they fail to get confirmed, you might see the beginning of a revolt against Donald Trump from within his own party. Right? They're willing to give him a grace period. Right? They're willing to give him a few mulligans because of his impressive electoral victory. But if Trump keeps blowing it with these picks, then that goodwill is going to evaporate fast. And when the goodwill evaporates, then there'll be less political capital to spend. There'll be less ability to get things done during this rare opportunity at the beginning of a term where you usually have the most political capital that you ever do, where you have a small hold on both the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. And Trump seems determined to force the Senate into a massive loyalty test of confirming these reckless picks. So place me more on the side of concerned than giddy with joy over Trump cabinet so far. What type of person do you think would not only be the ideal leadership profile for this role, but also effectively address the current problems? Well, it's got to be someone who has a background in running things. Right? Loyalty is not enough. There's a great text in the Torah: beware of your eyes, beware of following your eyes, after which you prostitute yourselves. And Donald Trump, he puts a priority on how well people appear on TV, and there's absolutely no connection between how people do on TV and how effectively they govern. And so he chooses much of his legal team, many of his lawyers, on the basis of their looks rather than on the basis of their effectiveness. And that's not a good sign. And then he's choosing a Fox News weekend host as SecDef because he looks good on TV. And when Trump cabinet picks come up, their TV appearances get a lot of scrutiny from Trump. I think this is not a good way to choose a cabinet. And apparently the Matt Gaetz nomination was decided within a matter of hours. And Susie Wiles was kept in the dark, right? And so if Trump has to keep Susie Wiles in the dark, that's not a good sign, because Susie Wiles has a lot of good sense, and she has consistently acted as a good disciplinary force on Donald Trump. And if he's just going to keep her in the sidelines, if you're so convinced that you've got a good pick, then run it by Susie Wiles. Let her in. All right? If you've got a great idea, then expose it to scrutiny. Don't just keep things hidden and then spring it. Now, there was a funny observation by Michael Smerconish that Kristi Noem, who does not appear competent to run the Department of Homeland Security, right? She must have been relieved when Pete Hegseth was nominated for SecDef, because he appears even less competent than Kristi Noem. And so Pete Hegseth would soak up media attention from Kristi Noem's lack of competence. And then Matt Gaetz is nominated for Attorney General, and so that takes attention off Pete Hegseth. And then if Bobby Kennedy is nominated for Department of Health and Human Services, right, that would take attention off of Matt Gaetz, which is hilarious, right? This is government optimized for entertainment purposes. But I think Robert Kennedy would be a horrible choice, though I'll admit I've come around on fluoride. I thought the case for fluoride in water was open and shut, and Bobby Kennedy wanted to take fluoride out of water. I thought that's crazy. Then I even read a Washington Post column saying that there's a good case to be made for removing fluoride from water, that you have enough studies showing that it leads to a lower IQ in babies. So I'll admit maybe Bobby Kennedy has more good ideas than I initially anticipated. I think his anti-vaccine stance is terrible. Most everything that I know about Bobby Kennedy I find disturbing. Trump kind of chosen his previous lawyers on looks. Yeah, you look at many of his previous attorneys over the past 18 months in particular, and he's clearly choosing them on the basis of looks. In fact, one of them, that Alina woman, is a good chance to be his press secretary. So Trump puts a higher priority on how people come across on TV compared to any other president of which I'm aware. Now, it's not totally absurd to choose people on the basis of how they come across on TV, because to have clarity and to be able to speak under pressure, right, to have organized thoughts, you have to put together a case under hostile questioning, right? These are good signs. Right, clarity is effective for organization. Being able to operate under pressure is a good sign for a leader. Right, the quality of your voice gives a lot of indication about what type of person you are, or what kind of emotional state you're in. But overall, it seems rather shallow. But my God, it is ridiculously entertaining. And there was a devastating article in The Atlantic about Matt Gaetz, about how when he was in the Florida House of Representatives, he would engage in competitions with his fellow politicians where they would give scores, right? You'd get 1 point if you slept with a staffer, 3 points if you slept with a married staffer, 5 points if you slept with a politician from the other side, like 8 points if you slept with a married politician from the opposite party. But it bespeaks a nihilism in Matt Gaetz. He would show videos of his sexual conquests to his fellow politicians. So he's a rich kid, and he didn't have many friends growing up. He would bully people. He would use his wealth to bully people. Now, on the other hand, there are reasons to be concerned that the deep state released allegations that they knew to be bogus on Matt Gaetz to try to kneecap him because he was a leading Donald Trump spokesperson. And so the existing Justice Department may well have leaked all sorts of damaging information about Matt Gaetz and pursued investigations of him primarily for the purpose of embarrassing him. And so it would be amusing that the team, the organization that was trying to embarrass Matt Gaetz and was following Tulsi Gabbard around, that now Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard will be able to flip the table on those who are harassing them. I've known about the levels of fluoride testing for years. The government denied it until now. Yeah, there's a good case for removing fluoride from water. Alicia Silverstein endorsed RFK. Well, if the Washington Post says it's true, then that's all one needs to know. Stranger things have happened. I love what John Fetterman, the Democratic Pennsylvania senator, said about Donald Trump's pick of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. He said that's God-level trolling. So John Fetterman has become like an unexpected surprise and often a delight from the Democratic Party. He often says tough truths that other members of his party don't have the balls to say. Mark Halperin picked up on an important issue this week, that why are Democrats so much better at raising money online from small donors than Republicans? The reason that Republicans didn't pick up more U.S. Senate seats and House seats is because they were substantially outspent by the Democratic opposition by about 3-1. And while Trump was able to get an enormous amount of media coverage, so he was able to overcome being outspent 2-1, the down ballot Republicans weren't able to get nearly as much media attention. And so being outspent 3-1 by their opposition, probably decisive in many of these races. And it appears the Democrats did have a superior ground game, but the Republicans had a better strategy. So here's an insight that makes recent elections make more sense, that Donald Trump is increasingly appealing to low-propensity voters, right? So voters who primarily, if they turn out at all, turn out in presidential elections, they don't turn special elections and midterms. So these are low-propensity male voters who listen to things like the Joe Rogan podcast, while the Democratic strategy was based on appealing to high-propensity female voters who do turn out to vote much more often than men. Now, this was the best-funded Democratic campaign ever, right? They had over $1 billion to spend. And why did their data people sound quite confident by election day? Right, what were they misreading in the data? Right, and apparently they didn't give enough credence to the low propensity male voters that Donald Trump was able to turn out. The Donald Trump data team was much more ahead of the game, it turns out. So I wonder why Trump's team was able to see this so much more clearly than the Democrats, that they'd have the ability to turn out these low propensity voters. Like, who knew that Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk would be as effective at turning out these low propensity male voters as they were? You'd think with all the hundreds of millions of dollars that the Democrats had, that they would have had access to better data. Now, the Kamala campaign wasn't a total waste, right? They were able to keep Trump's margins in the swing states lower than many other states. So they about did as good a job as they could have. And so they're able to limit Trump's margins effectively to about 2% in the swing states. I like what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said after the election. So Donald Trump reduced her margin of victory to about half of what it was in the previous election. And so she asked in an Instagram live stream, what podcasts are you guys listening to? Like, I need to better understand the views of people who voted for Donald Trump. And Mark Halperin had on a Democratic strategist yesterday, and he says, look, I don't know anyone who votes for Donald Trump. Like, all my friends are Democratic voters. And so I think this is much more true of people on the Democratic side of things. They simply don't have friends who vote for Trump. While for Trump supporters, we do have friends who vote for Democrats, because Democrats are far more likely to eliminate someone from their life if they don't agree with their voting choices. So when it comes to political discussions, in general, Republicans are delighted if you'll meet them part way, right? If you're a Democrat and Republicans can find some common ground with you on something, by and large, the Republican reaction is delight. While for Democrats, they don't take delight that you'll meet them part way. Right? If you don't go all the way with them, they tend to have a disappointed and hostile reaction. And so there was an angry caller to Mark Halperin's show this morning. He said, why are you talking about a mental health crisis on the left? Why are you talking about a mental health crisis among Republicans if Donald Trump were to lose? And Halperin didn't answer appropriately, but this is how I'd answer. Democrats are far more invested in politics than Republicans are. So Republicans, by and large, will deal with a political defeat by just getting on with their life. Now, when I read liberal reactions to the election, I read a lot of liberals saying they're going to put more time into their family and their friends and the things that they can control. Well, this is what Republicans and people on the right do by reflex. Republicans overwhelmingly do not devote their lives to political activism. Politics is not usually a top three concern. Right? Usually top three concerns for Republican voters are their family, their job, their community. But for Democrats, a considerable amount of their emotional resources are invested in outcomes outside of themselves. Systemic racism, sexism, all sorts of concerns in the wider society that they have no control over. And so this is going to lead to a lot more mental health problems. Right? If your well-being is invested in an electoral result, right, you're going to experience a lot more turmoil. Just as the more extreme the sports fandom, the more likely you are to dealing with someone who doesn't have much else going on in their life. Right? If someone is coloring their hair and shaving their hair and their body hair and dressing up for a big game, it's unlikely that they're a professional. It's unlikely that they're a CEO. It's unlikely that they're doing important scholarship, right? The more extreme your sports fandom, the less you have going on in your life. The more extreme your political partisanship, the less likely it is that you have anything else going on in your life. And so the more extreme your political partisanship and your sporting partisanship, the more likely you are to have mental health problems, because the more invested you are in outcomes outside of yourself. Sounds like Gaetz was entrapped by partisan activists. Didn't know the girl on the boat was underage. They wanted to shut him up. When Elon Musk stated this could be the last Democratic election if the Democrats win, I believe it struck a chord with many people. Yeah, it struck a chord with many mentally ill people. like normal, healthy, sane people who have a job that they are committed to, and a family and friends and a community they're committed to, understand that the notion that this would be the last election ever in the United States was insane. Right? Only people who are mentally ill, right? Only people who are so invested in a hyperbolic understanding of the political could possibly have thought this is the last democratic election we'll have in the United States. Right? What kind of person has a hyperbolic understanding of politics or sports? Right? Someone who doesn't have anything else going on in his life and so has a need for excitement. I remember in the fall of 2007, nothing in my life was working. I just quit writing on the pornography industry, so I abandoned the way I'd earned my living for much of the previous 10 years. I wasn't happy in my relationship, so my love life wasn't working, my income wasn't working, my profession wasn't working. The only thing that I had going on is the Dallas Cowboys were having a great season. So I became more invested in the Dallas Cowboys than I should have. Then when they lost in the divisional round after a 13-3 regular season, but they lost in the divisional round to the eventual Super Bowl champions, New York Giants, that was devastating because I had nothing else going on in my life. And there are other points in my life where nothing was working except I was having very exciting romantic and sexual experiences. And so I put too much weight on these relationships, and then they all broke under that weight because I had nothing else that was going on. So anyone who thinks that this is going to be the last democratic election in the United States, right, they are overly invested in a dramatic outcome that is simply not there in reality, but they need that drama, that sense of end times excitement, that eschatological thrill to give meaning and purpose to their lives that otherwise aren't working. So if you've backed yourself essentially into a cave where your relationships aren't working, you're not close with your family, you're not moving ahead in your career, you're not developing new skills, you're not getting an education, you're not an important contributing member of your community, you don't have a family, you don't have a love life, all right, you're backed into a cave, then all you will have are your dreams and fantasies about what could possibly justify all your failure in all the normal areas of life, or some kind of hyperbolic, dramatic Civil War type end times outcome that you could say, I see through the BS, man. I can see what's really going on. And that way you can give yourself comfort for failing in all the normal responsibilities of life, right? A normal man develops a career, earns a good living, gets married, has a family, contributes to his community, has hobbies and friends on the side. And if you don't have any of those things, right, if you're overweight, you're in poor health, you're not developing any job skills, you're not moving ahead in a profession or a career, you're not developing your entrepreneurial abilities, you are a non-factor in your community, you're not close with your family, right? If you're not building anything in your life, in your real life, then the more invested you'll get in your fantasy life. And so you'll impute all sorts of drama and fantastic outcomes into a reality where it's just not there. I'm a big fan of Mark Shapiro, who is a scholar of modern Jewish thought. And he's just started a new series of talks for the YouTube channel Torah in Motion. And he's talking, profiling one early 19th century Mizrahi rabbi. So Mizrahi are the religious Zionists, the national Zionists. So these are generally modern Orthodox Jews. And he talked about the importance of Jews speaking the land of the country in which they lived. So for most Jews in Eastern Europe, they didn't really know the land of the country in which they lived. If they lived in Russia, they didn't consider themselves Russians because they felt excluded by the Russian government, and so they didn't bother even to learn Russian, and they did everything they could to get out of military service. And so the non-Jews saw them as Jews, not as Russians, because the Jews did not participate in military service, did not participate in wider society, and didn't even speak Russian. So this Mizrahi rabbi said, it's vitally important that Jews speak fluently the language of the land in which they reside so that they can become good citizens. And we just can't have Jews trying to avoid the draft and avoid participating in the wider society, because you incentivize the wider society to not view Jews as worthy of citizenship. And so too, when MAGA extremists who've got nothing going on and just have contempt for wider society essentially live in a cave, you are reducing your effectiveness, your possibility in life, your possibilities for personal growth, for human connection, for economic growth, for just making a contribution. You will be dispirited because we primarily get our energy from our connections with other people. And so this rabbi said to the Jews of Eastern Europe, if you live in Poland, learn Polish. Right? Take up your responsibilities as a citizen of Poland. Become worthy of citizenship. Right? Learn to speak the language of the people. Right? Interact with your neighbors in a friendly way. Don't just retreat into a shtetl, because for hundreds and hundreds of years, right, Jews in Eastern Europe, they lived in an atmosphere of mutual loathing with the non-Jews among them, and they didn't even speak the language of the country they were in. And so I think this applies to people today. You should learn to speak the language of the people around you, not just literal English, but there's nothing wrong with some participation in popular culture, whether sports or the leading TV shows of the time. Right? Have topics of conversation that you can engage in with coworkers, with strangers that you meet on the street, with your neighbors, that are safe, that are not divisive like politics and religion. Right? Become a good citizen, and then you have a lot more possibilities in life. Right? The more withdrawn people are, the more they live life in the cave, right? The more they stoke their resentments. And when you have resentments, right, they just distract your brain. We're akin to air traffic controllers, where we might have, say, 12 concrete responsibilities for the day, but if we have resentments, if we're writing up tickets on people for violating our unenforceable rules, right, then what's occupying our mind is not just the 12 most important tasks of the day, but our 15 separate resentments for people violating our unenforceable rules. And people shouldn't be watching these TV shows, and people shouldn't have this opinion on abortion, and I should not have been fired from that job. Right? And all these resentments just make you less effective at life. They separate you from other people. And the greatest source of energy and prosperity, the ability to survive difficult times and to enhance your enjoyment of positive things in your life, is your ability to connect and get on the same page with others. If you're looking to meet a member of the opposite sex, or volunteering, having friends, having community, participating fluently in the wider world, recognizing social cues, right? These things all enhance your abilities, both in prosperity, in economic terms, in social terms, in romantic terms, in personal growth terms. And being overly online when you should spend more time in the real world, being overly invested in politics or religion at the detriment of your ability to connect with others and form bonds and form community. Right? It's an escape, right? Meditation can be an escape. Excessive prayer, excessive exercise, excessive time online, excessive participation in extreme sports, right? Excessive religiosity, right? These are often just tools of escape from reality and from the inherent vulnerability that comes when you're bonded and connected with others. And the trolling that takes place online is often very funny and a lot of fun, but when it becomes a habit of mind, feeds back into your real life, makes you less effective. And Donald Trump, with his picks for his cabinet, it seems like a high level of trolling with much less concern for effectiveness and for governance. And so right now, I expect a downward spiral of corruption scandals, incompetence scandals, lower quality of government services, a recklessness that leaves America wide open to horrific events happening, because Donald Trump right now seems to be putting a priority on the entertainment aspect of politics rather than on the more mundane nuts and bolts of governing. You suggested you are too invested in politics. I don't think I am, because I recognize that my investment in politics is as a hobby and as an intellectual interest. And I know that my happiness level was not diminished when Joe Biden was elected president of the United States, right? My happiness level went down for a couple of days, and then it bounced back up to a normal level. So I wasn't an unhappy, resentful, angry man during the Joe Biden presidency, even though I probably disagreed with most of the things that he did. I was ambivalent about the vaccine mandates that the Biden administration tried to install. I was briefly ambivalent, and then I turned against them, said we should not mandate the taking of vaccines. And it turns out that that was right? That was a gigantic overreach by the Biden administration. Right? Both parties, when they're in power, they tend to overreach and then unnecessarily fire up the opposition. So right now it looks like Trump is overreaching by picking these incompetent, inexperienced people like Pete Hegseth, Kristi Noem, Matt Gaetz for high-level cabinet positions. Right? This strikes me as overreach, just like Joe Biden overreached when he tried to pass vaccine mandates in the U.S. military and other government departments. So on the face of it, I could understand why you'd want to mandate that, so that you'd have, right, a more effective, efficient workforce that'd be less vulnerable to something like COVID. But what you ended up doing was driving out a lot of good people from government service. And a pro-vaccination bloke like me has to face it, that there is an ornery side to Republican voters who resist going along with things that they don't understand. Like, if I can't understand it, then I don't want to do it. And there are many benefits to this ornery approach, skepticism of expertise, many downsides to it, but this is my side. They're ornery, and I'm just not going to do something if I don't understand it. And why I think the social distancing and masking and many of the other COVID strategies were good ideas, right, to the extent that there was overreach, that they went on too long, right? Schools being shut down for 2 years was clearly massive government overreach, right? It was clearly something that was bad, right? In the first few months of a dangerous epidemic like COVID, right, I'm fine with shutting the schools. But for 2 years, right, massive mistake. Mandating vaccination, massive mistake. Talking about vaccination as though it were a magic pill that would prevent people from getting COVID, massive mistake. Recognizing that the benefits of vaccination were relatively short-lived, right? A few months max, you get some benefit from getting vaccinated. So overstating the benefits of vaccination was a massive mistake. Understating the dangers, that even though I think it's clear that getting vaccinated for COVID in the United States is overall a better choice, there are significant dangers, right? To me, they are outweighed by the benefits. But understating the dangers for some people of getting vaccinated is a massive mistake. So you can be on the right side of things, but when you overstate your case, when you try to mandate your case, as opposed to just making a case as far as the facts allow and allowing then others to make their own decisions, right? Overstating and mandating a lot of COVID restrictions turned out to be a massive mistake, and there was a rebellion from the ornery independent side of American voters. I never use AI. I never use AI bots. Just don't use AI. You come off as an educated, calm, highly intelligent young professional. Oh, thank you. I don't strive for optimizing for excitement. I'm not trying to optimize my viewpoints for attention. I'm not trying to optimize what I say to get subscribers. I'm not trying to optimize what I say on a partisan level. I don't optimize for income. I don't optimize for self-importance, that I can see things that are happening that you can't see. I can see that we're in the middle of a non-shooting civil war. I can see that we're on the path to becoming the Soviet Union. Right? These are two perspectives taken by Dennis Prager. Right? These hyperbolic assessments of reality, that we're living in the end times, that we're on the edge of catastrophe, that America was saved or lost by this election. These are all elaborate ways of overstating your own importance. Right? The spinning of pseudo-profound BS that you get from a lot of gurus and talk show hosts, right? Pretending that they see profound dangers in the world around us that ordinary people are just not smart enough to see. Right? I try to avoid those hyperbolic, self-important, highly partisan, manipulative, low IQ approaches to talking about politics that dominate cable news, that dominate live streams, that dominate talk radio, that even dominate the leading partisan pundits. And I try to optimize for truth, and I try to optimize for reducing the chances of doing harm with anything I say, and optimizing for the chances of prompting someone in a pro-social direction, as opposed to retreating to your cave and having a hyperbolic understanding of the world around you that cuts you off from the chance of having a normal, healthy life. Right? Many people who are losing at life get sucked in to a particular exciting guru, pundit, live streamer. He becomes like their virtual guide, virtual friend. And I experienced that when I had chronic fatigue syndrome in my 20s. I latched on to Dennis Prager, had this largely virtual relationship with Dennis Prager, where it was very exciting, this world of good and evil that he presented for me. And he enlisted me in this fight against evil and for goodness. And undoubtedly he was right about many things, but also there was a hugely manipulative, pseudo-profound BS component to what he does. So Tuesday, Dennis Prager apparently had a fall, and appears that he's going to need another back surgery. I think this will be back surgery number 4. And Steve Saylor had a tweet that Dennis Prager came to his school, said that if young people want to make the world a better place, they should try being nicer to the people around them, including their parents. And this perspective was apparently greeted with boos at the high school where Dennis Prager was speaking but that Steve Saylor said that his son heard it and adopted it. And Steve Saylor was grateful for that piece of good advice. So, well, I tend to be on the skeptical side with regard to the pronouncements of people like Dennis Prager and Jordan Peterson. I recognize that they're clean your room and be nice to your parents is good advice. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later.